The bolters in Space Marine 2 feel weak. I originally came into this video with the intention to disprove that. Instead, after research and playing, there's some validity to that statement. Because of this, we'll be going over the lore and see how it diverges from the gameplay, why this might be the case, and if any steps can be taken to mitigate this. For those of you wanting an explanation of how the different types of bolters in-game work and their respective roles, that'll come out in the second part. First, to keep the explanation short, as I know you're here for the lore rant, the bolters were made to replace Volkite weapons, as those weapons were too expensive and too complicated to make for the massed armies of the Great Crusade. The bolter being a much simpler, more reliable, and versatile option for the legions of Space Marines. Simply put, these weapons had two goals in mind: turn the target into a bloody paste while having his nearby friends look like they were front row at a Gallagher show, and having those friends realize surrendering to the Emperor's forces is a solid idea. The bolter is so brutal because it's essentially a full auto precision grenade launcher with projectiles that have rockets a la Gyrojet rounds. Is this to prevent bullet drop? Increase the likelihood of penetration? Look cool? Kinda irrelevant when the projectile has an explosive in it with a mass reactive fuse meant to detonate when the round has penetrated its target. Think armor-piercing, high-explosive shells tanks were equipped with. If this round penetrates, it's lights out. So why is my weapon of mass destruction taking 2 body shots bare minimum on the easiest difficulty to kill a Hormigaunt? Sure, we can argue that Gaunts aren't small, approximately human size and weigh 440 pounds, which is almost 2 times the average weight of the largest dog, the English Mastiff. And we can argue that that extra weight is in armor. Let's say level 4 ceramic, as ceramic is comparable to chitin, chitin being bug armor, and is in fact pound for pound stronger than steel. But an AP 30-06 round can penetrate that armor, and so can a lasgun. And if a lasgun can, so can a bolter firing sub 20mm rounds. And if a bolter can penetrate, you get bug soup. Another argument that can be made is since they're bugs, they have exoskeletons, which means if you blow limbs off, as long as they are at a joint point, they actually won't bleed out and keep moving. But again, body shots. Like removing the foundation of a house, a creature can't operate if their torso is in pieces. Even the warriors wouldn't be immune. Their weight class is that of an American bison, and even if their armor is twice as thick as Gaunt's, 2 or 3 shots in the same spot would defeat their armor. We know this because that's how many shots it would take to pierce the breastplate of power armor. Armor which is made of ceramite. Care to guess what's in that? Which brings us to the Trader Marines. Is the bolter capable at fighting other Space Marines? Well, considering there's a book series called The Horus Heresy that has Marines left, right, and center being killed by bolters, I'd say yes. Even if some of these traitors are dust-filled, a few rounds as close as we are in-game are more than capable of rendering the power armor useless, especially if we're talking headshots. The Terminators and bosses like Zoanthropes, Neurothropes, Carnifexes, Hive Tyrants, and Sorcerers all have better excuses between being walking tanks, tactical dreadnoughts, having brain shields, or warp shields. All can account for making a bolter feel lackluster and having a heavier weapon in those niche cases more prudent. But these enemies are uncommon, and their durability is acceptable. You don't feel inadequate burning through all your ammo with them like you would after fighting 20 Gaunts and 3 warriors. Which brings us back to the point. Why are the bolters so lackluster? Here's my theory. This game has a progression system, and through that progression system, you unlock stronger and more efficient bolters that allow you to face stronger foes and still be viable in combat. Those high-ranking bolters absolutely represent what we expected a bolter to a bare degree, if playing on lower difficulties when this weapon was meant to be used on lethal. In general, it appears they want your weapon to toe the line of effectiveness throughout leveling up to ensure there's a challenge. Otherwise, you as a player would have little motivation in progressing through levels if the weapon you had was OP to begin with. Second, a big mechanic of the game is melee combat. Hell, performing parries and melee executions provide armor and heal temporary damage. If your ranged weapons were too good, then that part of the game mechanics would be neglected. The game developers had to walk a fine line to ensure both were viable and one doesn't outshine the other, while also making part of the difficulty in the game understanding you have limited resources like ammunition and to husband them accordingly. Lastly, this is a multiplayer game where you ideally have friends and can coordinate ranged melee builds that counter specific threats, allowing you to focus on what you're strong against and get the most out of your equipment. When you ask, why does my bolter feel weak? You should look into these questions. Is my weapon high level enough? Am I meleeing enough? And is there a good team balance? This is especially a question worth asking when playing solo, as that will make you feel more impotent as you won't have the versatility to counter all threats, and while AI allies help, they aren't as good as friends. If there were any constructive criticisms I have, is to allow players to utilize the ammo variety that bolters have. The fact there's a laundry list of different bolt types, and we stuck to just the standard, is a misstep in my opinion. Maybe instead of hard stat buffs, have some of the up-leveled bolters use rounds designed against Tyranid or Chaos forces. All in all, I understand why the bolter feels balanced the way it is. But with the bolter being the flagship of Warhammer personnel weapons, it makes seeing the weapons for his Angels of Death underperforming slightly upsetting. Thank you all for watching part 1. Next part, I'll be going over the bolters in Space Marine 2 in more detail, along with their roles and how best to utilize them. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time out in the warp.